When James discussed the use of the tongue in James chapter 3, he made three basic points. Number one who can bridle the tongue can bridle the whole body as well. He said, "For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well." Number two, he said the tongue is small but powerful. Now, if we put bits in the horses' mouths so that they will obey us, we direct the entire body as well. Look at the ships also, though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. In number three, he said that the tongue cannot be tamed. For every species of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea, is tamed and has been tamed by the human race. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. In making these points, James taught us a few lessons. Though sin may be common among men, we are to strive to avoid the sins of the tongue. And it is important that we try to avoid these sins because of the great amount of damage that can be done through them. Yet James said we cannot tame the tongue after saying we need to control the tongue in order to avoid sin. Well, is that a contradiction? No, it's not. Well, if we cannot tame the tongue, how can we control the tongue? Well, we have to make sure our heart is right. The wise man said, "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life." We control our tongue by making sure our heart is right before God. If our heart is not right, our tongue will not be tamed. Notice what James said. "From the same mouth come both blessings and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be this way. Does a fountain send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter water? Can a fig tree, my brethren, produce olives, or a vine produce figs? Nor can salt water produce fresh." Our tongue will follow the direction of our heart. So if we are to avoid the sins of the tongue, we need to start with the heart. So let's notice briefly some sins of the tongue and how we can avoid them. Number one is false teaching. The fact that false teaching is one of the sins of the tongue is implied in the immediate context of what James was talking about in James chapter 3. He began that chapter with this admonition, "Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we will incur a stricter judgment." When we teach, we have an obligation to teach the truth. The New Testament is filled with warnings against false teaching in addition to pointing out the damaging effects of error. Well, how do we keep from teaching what is false? Well, it starts with the heart. We first have to love the truth, as 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse 10 says. Because if we do not love the truth, we're going to be quick to abandon the truth. But in addition to loving the truth, we also need to know it and understand it. Someone may have a desire to teach the truth, but if he doesn't know the truth, he will stray from the standard that he tries to proclaim. Number two is lying. Lying is condemned throughout the scriptures. We are told that all liars will have their part in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone. Satan was described by Jesus as the father of lies. Lies lead people away from the truth and allow them to be content in their lost condition. Well, how do we keep from lying? Well, we need to appreciate the value of truth. The wise man said, "Buy truth and do not sell it," in Proverbs 23 and verse 23. Truth is not a temporary investment that we can buy it and then sell it whenever a good deal comes along. We are to buy the truth and never give it up. And remember what Jesus said, "You will know the truth and the truth will make you free." Truth is what sets us free. Lies keep us enslaved to sin. Number three is boasting. Boasting is the elevation of self, and this either intentionally or unintentionally causes us to put others down. Christians are not to boast unless we boast in the Lord, as 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 31 says. The damaging effects of boasting include division and envy, but Christians are to seek for peace and unity. Well, how do we keep from boasting? Well, we need to learn humility. Paul wrote, Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. We are to strive to build others up rather than seeking to elevate ourselves. And number 4 is the sin of gossip. Gossip is speaking things about others that should not be said, regardless of whether they're true or not. Gossip is a sin that we need to avoid because it goes hand in hand with division and strife, as we've already talked about. So, how do we avoid gossip? Well, first, we need to be busy, but not busy bodies. Notice what Paul said about the potential danger of the church providing permanent benevolent support for younger widows. He said, at the same time, they also learn to be idle, and they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things not proper to mention. Therefore, I want younger widows to get married, bear children, keep house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach. The more idle time someone has, the more opportunity they have to gossip, along with other sins as well. Paul said that by filling one's life with good works, it takes time away from evil works. But the second way we avoid gossip is by practicing the golden rule. Jesus said, in everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. If we would not want the things that we say about others to be said of us, then it's a good indication that we should not be talking about those things. Number 5 is filthy language. Filthiness in speech is not fitting for saints. Paul said, there must be no filthiness and silly talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. This type of language makes us appear to be no different from the world. After Jesus had been arrested, Peter was trying to convince the crowd that he did not know who Jesus was, and simple denials were not convincing. The text says that he began to curse and swear in an attempt to prove that he was not one of Jesus' disciples. If we want others to think that we are not disciples of Christ, filthy language can be an effective way of giving that impression. Well, how do we avoid filthy language? We have to keep our thoughts pure. Paul wrote, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. Our thoughts eventually come out through our speech. So if we are to control our tongue, we need to make sure our heart is right before God. If our heart is corrupt, then false teaching, lying, boasting, gossip, and filthy language are sure to follow. So let us examine our speech and examine our hearts and conform our thinking to the will of God so that we can avoid the sins of the tongue.